There's a storm of whispers in the music world, stories that live between the lines of interviews, glances in award shows, and cryptic comments lost in the noise of fame. One of the most persistent is this: Michael Jackson, the king of pop himself, knew something. He foresaw something. Not just about the industry, not just about its decay or its power games, but about its future. And specifically about Beyoncé. Long before she became the Queen Bey we know today, long before the Super Bowl performances and the billion-dollar empire, Michael saw it coming. And if you know how to read between the beats, he may have even warned us. This isn't just another celebrity theory. This is a trail that starts with subtle clues, moments in history, unspoken rivalries, and prophetic words spoken behind closed doors, only now being pieced together like a puzzle with high stakes and deep shadows. Back in the early 2000s, Michael Jackson was navigating a turbulent phase. The music industry had shifted dramatically. Napster had changed how fans consumed music. Record labels were crumbling under the pressure of digital evolution, and pop stars were being sculpted differently, less mystery, more marketing. Michael, ever the visionary, wasn't just watching these changes. He was speaking out against them. In a now infamous 2002 speech in London, Jackson took direct aim at Sony Music, particularly then CEO Tommy Mottola. He accused Mottola of corruption, racism, and destroying artists. But listen carefully to what Jackson also said in that moment about how the music industry was starting to reward the wrong things. He said they were no longer nurturing art, but engineering success. It was no longer about the message, it was about the machine. At the time, many dismissed these words as ranting, the desperate cry of a fading icon. But were they? Beyoncé was just beginning her solo career in that very era. Destiny's Child was winding down, and her debut solo album Dangerously in Love was released in 2003. It was polished, market-ready, and explosive. It had the makings of a new type of pop empire. Behind her was an unstoppable machine, her father Matthew Knowles, Columbia Records, and a growing list of the industry's top producers and choreographers. But this wasn't just talent breaking through. This was a launchpad prepared with precision. And Jackson, who had climbed the ladder rung by rung through the harsh world of Motown, could see the architecture behind it. He could see the shift. He could feel the presence of a new monarch being crowned, not organically, but orchestrated. Michael, whose career was built on unprecedented artistry, mystery, and relentless innovation, began to grow wary. Those close to him during the mid-2000s reported that he often spoke about how real artists were being silenced. He worried about how the industry was eating itself alive. In a private conversation leaked years later, he warned, "The future of music will be dangerous if it's controlled by businessmen who don't understand art." That sounds abstract until you apply it to the rise of artists who were perfect, polished, media-ready, and on-brand 24/7. Beyoncé fit that model with laser precision, and it's here that Jackson's words take a chilling turn, because he wasn't just talking about the system, he was talking about the chosen ones. In 2003, Michael invited Beyoncé to perform with him during his MSG 30th anniversary show. She respectfully declined, scheduling issues, they said, but the tension had already begun. Insiders recall Michael taking note of Beyoncé's ascent with curiosity and concern. She wasn't just rising, she was being positioned. Her performances were everywhere. Award shows, endorsements, media coverage. She had the industry at her feet, and it wasn't just earned, it was engineered. This wasn't the climb of a raw artist through the fires of struggle. This was the making of a media queen, tailored for the next era. Michael, who had lived through the pain of creative control battles, knew what this kind of power implied and how it could be weaponized. Then in 2005, everything shifted again. Michael's high-profile trial consumed the media. He was vilified, scrutinized, and publicly torn apart. During this time, Beyoncé's star was rising higher than ever. The comparisons were inevitable. Headlines began to shift. The new Michael, Queen Bey ascends. Some were premature, others were deliberate. But in the chaos of Jackson's most vulnerable period, Beyoncé's throne was being prepared. Michael, who saw how quickly the media flipped narratives, began to retreat further into silence. He wasn't just fighting a legal battle. He was watching the crown being lifted from his head before he was ready to surrender it. He made a curious remark in 2007 during a rare phone call with a longtime friend. Speaking about the future of music and the new generation of stars, he said, "They don't see the danger in being too perfect. When you lose mystery, you lose soul. And when you lose soul, you become a product." That line, "you become a product," rings louder now than ever. Beyoncé, for all her undeniable talent, has often been seen as the most flawlessly packaged artist of our time. Every move, every look, every word curated. Michael saw this emerging trend and warned that it was unsustainable, that the soul of music would vanish behind branding, behind algorithm-driven perfection. 1 year after Michael's tragic death, Beyoncé performs at the Grammy Awards. A tribute segment honors Jackson. She sings If I Were a Boy before transitioning into You Oughta Know. Powerful, yes, but noticeably she is not part of the core tribute lineup organized for Michael. Why? Whispers again surfaced that the Jackson estate had its own reservations. Michael had, in his final years, grown wary of who would carry the torch. He didn't want it passed through media coronation. He wanted it earned. And perhaps in his view, Beyoncé's rise had skipped the trial by fire that shaped legends like him, like Prince, like Whitney. But the most haunting warning came in the form of a journal entry, allegedly from Jackson's personal notes, recovered after his death. In it, he wrote, "They will create the perfect star. She will be beautiful, talented, obedient, and untouchable, but she will not be free, and the world will cheer while forgetting the cost." To some, that might read like the musings of a paranoid artist. But when held up against the industry machine that Beyoncé now operates within, Parkwood Entertainment, the global tour, the billion-dollar deals, it begins to feel like prophecy. Jackson was not anti-Beyoncé. He admired talent, he respected craft, but he feared the machine. And Beyoncé, knowingly or not, became the face of that machine's perfection. What he warned us about was the cost of losing art to algorithm, of trading message for marketing, and of allowing corporations to manufacture legends before they've lived the pain that makes them human. In Michael's world, pain was art, vulnerability was power, but the new model, polished, controlled, untouchable. And yet the story doesn't end there, because Beyoncé, in her own way, began to break free from the machine Michael feared. She started speaking up about race, about feminism, about industry control. Lemonade wasn't just an album, it was a rebellion, a reckoning. Could it be that Beyoncé, once the machine's masterpiece, is now the disruptor? Could she be fulfilling not just Michael's warning, but his hope? But before we can place Beyoncé in the role of either prophecy or disruptor, we have to go back to where it all began, not with her, but with Michael. In the 1980s, when Jackson reached his creative and commercial peak, he was already battling the invisible forces of control that sought to package and limit even him. Thriller wasn't just an album. It was a declaration of war against genre, race, and expectation. He was a black man forcing MTV, a rock-dominated platform, to accept pop, funk, soul, and style it had never championed before. And that fight wasn't clean. Michael didn't trust the industry even then. He knew it would always look for the next icon it could control more tightly, present more safely, and own more fully. In many ways, the industry wanted to replicate Michael without the chaos, without the rebellion, without the fragility. Beyoncé represented a new kind of opportunity. She could dance, she could sing, she could act, and above all, she followed the rules at first. She didn't come out of the gate throwing punches or calling out executives. She followed the blueprint. But Michael had seen what happened to artists who obeyed too long. They were devoured, burned out, spit out, and replaced. So when he spoke about how obedience is rewarded but creativity is punished, he wasn't being metaphorical. He was issuing a warning to all artists, including those like Beyoncé, who looked poised to inherit the very empire he built. It's hard to ignore the strange echoes between Michael's critiques of the industry and Beyoncé's later actions. Around 2013, something shifted. Beyoncé released her self-titled album with no promotion, no announcement, no press, just music. It was a defiant move, a break from the industry's dependency on media hype and corporate rollouts. That one moment, when she dropped an entire visual album on iTunes overnight, was seismic, and it was also familiar. Michael had done the same in his own way, constantly trying to escape the grip of executives, trying to let the music speak first. And suddenly, Beyoncé was doing the same. Was this a pivot, a realization of what Jackson had warned about? Or was it her own quiet rebellion against the system that had made her? Then came 2016, Lemonade. That project shook the music world not just because of its content, but because of what it represented. Beyoncé was no longer silent. She was political, she was angry, she was vulnerable. She told stories of infidelity, identity, blackness, and womanhood. She took off the crown for a moment and showed the bruises underneath. And in doing so, she crossed into the realm that Michael had occupied for decades, the realm of art as truth, of music as resistance. It was as if the prophecy had bent in on itself. The product had become the protester, and Michael's warning began to feel like a cycle rather than a verdict. Still, there's more to this than legacy. There's the deeper, darker question. Was Michael truly warning about Beyoncé specifically, or about what the industry was planning to do through her? Because that distinction matters. Beyoncé is undoubtedly a generational talent. Her discipline, her vision, her execution, they're nearly unmatched. But the machine behind her is what Michael feared most. The machine that sells perfection while sanitizing pain. That turns narratives into campaigns. That tells artists they are royalty, while binding them with invisible chains. Michael didn't fear Beyoncé the person, he feared Beyoncé the product. And in the years since his death, we've seen how even she has tried to fight that very system. One of the most startling revelations came from Michael's trusted collaborators in the final years of his life. They said he spoke often about the next queen, not in jealousy, but in concern. He believed there would be a hand-picked successor to the throne of global pop stardom, not someone who would simply rise through merit, but someone the corporations would elevate, protect, and perfect. He worried that such a figure, no matter how talented, would unknowingly become a tool. In one conversation, he said, "They'll raise her like a goddess, but she won't know who's pulling the strings." It's a bone-chilling thought, because for years, Beyoncé moved within an industry that praised her, but also used her as a symbol, a safe kind of radical, a perfectly curated queen. But here's where the irony begins to sting. The very warning Michael gave us may have been absorbed by Beyoncé herself. What if the reason she broke the mold, releasing albums without warning, creating visual stories steeped in cultural history, speaking out against injustice, was because she too realized the game being played around her? What if the most powerful part of Michael's legacy wasn't Thriller or Moonwalk, but the courage to fight the machine from inside it? And what if Beyoncé, knowingly or not, picked up that same weapon? Still, there are questions that linger in the corners of this story. Why did Michael never publicly embrace Beyoncé, even when she praised him as her greatest influence? Why were there no known collaborations between them? Why did he keep his distance, even as their trajectories began to mirror each other's in eerie ways? Some say it was simply timing. Others say it was deeper, a sense of foreboding, that he saw in her not a threat, but a confirmation. That his time had passed and the industry had chosen its next monarch. But instead of pride, he felt unease, because this wasn't the way artists were meant to be crowned, not by committee, not by algorithm, but by fire, by risk, by rebellion. Even in death, Jackson's influence over Beyoncé can't be ignored. Her tribute performances often borrow his moves, his staging, his drama. At Coachella 2018, she stood on that stage not just as a performer, but as a spectacle, a cultural moment, a global force. It was in many ways the kind of grand-scale artistry that Michael pioneered. But even that performance sparked debate. Was it raw or was it theater? Was it freedom or was it still a performance within the system? Jackson believed the system would evolve to make rebellion itself marketable, and he might have been right. Beyoncé's activism is now a brand, her identity a corporation, her music a business plan, and yet within all of that there is still power, still message, still soul. The line between prophecy and paradox blurs here. Michael Jackson warned us about perfection, about packaging, about the death of artistry in the hands of corporate design. He feared the rise of stars too polished to be questioned, too perfect to be human, and Beyoncé in many ways embodies that fear. But she also challenges it. She uses the very tools the machine gave her to break it open from within, and perhaps that is the most Michael thing of all. And so here we are, caught in the space between prophecy and power, between a warning and a witness. Michael Jackson didn't leave behind a manifesto, but he left fragments, speeches, journal entries, offhand comments, and a career defined by resistance against control. His warnings weren't always direct. They came cloaked in metaphors, in sudden interviews, in lyrics that sound different when played backwards through the lens of hindsight. And Beyoncé, whether she knows it or not, has become both the fulfillment and the disruption of those warnings. She is the product the machine tried to perfect, and the artist who keeps trying to break the mold, to reshape what a pop legend is allowed to be. Let's not forget how Michael's life ended, in isolation, in suspicion, surrounded by lawyers, doctors, and handlers. Even in his final rehearsals for This Is It, those closest to him said he was worried, not just about the shows or his health, but about his legacy, about whether the world would remember the man or just the brand. He knew what the industry does to legends, how it builds them, sells them, and then buries them beneath their own iconography. And it's that fear, that silent scream behind the glove and the moonwalk, that now haunts every move of the new generation. Beyoncé may be walking in his footsteps, but she is also walking through the warning signs he left behind. Then came Renaissance in 2022, a glittering album full of joy, defiance, and dance floor rebellion, but also a clear statement. Beyoncé was no longer interested in just being perfect. She wanted to play, to breathe, to challenge. It was not an album for the radio. It was a celebration of queer culture, underground Black roots, and the kind of music that once lived in clubs far from corporate stages. In many ways, it was a step closer to Michael's core, the rawness, the cultural fusion, the edge. And yet still, there remains that tension. How much of this freedom is real, and how much of it is a performance of freedom within a system that still wants to sell perfection? It's a question Michael asked all his life. Can an artist ever truly be free inside a system built to commodify their soul? That question tormented him. It chased him through his eras, from Off the Wall's youthful funk to Thriller's global explosion to Dangerous's paranoia to H.I. Story's outrage. And now it quietly trails Beyoncé too. She's not immune to the weight of expectation. Every project, every performance is dissected not just as art, but as strategy. Is she authentic? Is she too controlled? Is she a rebel or just playing one? There's also the eerie silence between their legacies. You'll rarely find Beyoncé publicly reflecting on Michael Jackson's warnings. She honors his influence but avoids the deeper critiques. And that silence too says something. It may be respect, it may be caution, or it may be the awareness that his words about control, perfection, and being chosen still hang in the air like unsung lyrics. Words that apply not just to her, but to anyone who dares step into the throne room of global stardom. Michael wasn't perfect. He was flawed, haunted, brilliant, and sometimes contradictory, but his fears were never baseless. The industry that built him did try to destroy him, and he knew it would try again with someone else. Perhaps his final warning was never just about Beyoncé. It was about the system that selects its kings and queens, not for their voices, but for their pliability, and about how even the most powerful artists, once crowned, must fight to stay human. So what does it mean now in 2025 to say that Michael Jackson warned us? It means he saw the pattern. He saw how media turns artists into gods and then crucifies them when they bleed. He saw how real art, the kind that hurts, that risks, that breaks molds, is dangerous to the machine. And he saw how the future would be shaped by a new generation, some of whom would play along, some of whom would rebel, and some, like Beyoncé, who might do both. There's a kind of poetry in the way their stories intersect. Michael was forged in the fire of Motown and media scandal. Beyoncé rose through corporate polish and now seeks artistic liberation. Michael was chased by tabloids. Beyoncé commands the media. Michael's mystique was his armor. Beyoncé's openness is her shield. And yet they share the same stage, the same relentless demand for greatness, the same expectation to lead a generation, the same burden of being more than human. In the end, Michael's warning wasn't just about Beyoncé. It was about us, about how we, the audience, consume our icons, how we reward perfection and punish vulnerability, how we demand royalty and then question their crown. He warned that the music industry would learn to create stars so flawlessly, so mechanically, that we'd forget what made them real in the first place. And Beyoncé, for all her brilliance, still fights that fight. Every album, every tour, every carefully timed silence. So maybe the final twist of this story is that Michael didn't just warn us about Beyoncé. He warned Beyoncé about us, about what it means to be loved on a global scale, to be crowned, to be watched, and to be endlessly consumed. And maybe, just maybe, she listened. Not in public, not in tribute songs, but in how she began to reclaim her own story, her own sound, her own voice. And perhaps that is where the true legend lives, not just in the warning, but in how the warned respond.